So I learned a few things when I was there. First, I want to, do you know what Frodo was at Aragorn and Arwen's wedding?
What?
The ring bearer.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. But
I also heard he ruined a boxing match.
Really?
Yeah, he tried to destroy the ring.
Welcome, everybody, to the Decoding Cross-Border Ecommerce podcast. We're your hosts, Clint Reid, alongside Aaron Bezzant.
Good day.
Good day. Well, all right. So today we're going to talk about selling to New Zealand. And we've already talked about selling to Australia. There's different nuances actually selling to New Zealand. But it's a beautiful place. I mean, we have an office in Australia. And last time I was there, I was able to stop. Well, it was actually kind of turned into a family trip, but with family, we stopped in New Zealand and, did some pretty cool stuff there.
I said good day to start this because I'm actually leaving for Australia tomorrow. So I'm practicing a little bit. And at the end of my trip, do you know where I'm going?
Where?
New Zealand.
Oh,
I'm excited to talk about
I have some
this.
things you should do.
Ooh, tell me.
You should go to Hobbiton.
It's on my list. In fact, I just booked my ticket last night.
It's really cool there.
Yeah, I'm excited for that.
Yeah, I mean it's the first time they did the Lord of the Rings movie, they totally demolished that set, and so the second time when they did The Hobbit, they the landowners there said, look, under one condition, you need to build it essentially in a way that it can remain permanent, and so now you can go on a tour. And it's really, really cool, actually.
I'm excited. We're doing. I did the whole tour lunch combo, so I'm gonna do the tour and then sit down and actually have lunch in one of the houses or whatever.
Yeah.
So
yeah. You're gonna have a blast. Yeah, it's gonna be good. So I learned a few things when I was there. First, I want to. Do you know what Frodo was at Aragorn and Arwen's wedding?
What?
The ring bearer.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, but
I also heard he ruined a boxing match.
Really?
Yeah, he tried to destroy the ring.
Now, have you read the book?
No, I haven't read the book.
Okay, I've read the book, but do you know how Bilbo survived the entire trilogy?
How?
Old hobbits die hard.
Oh, boy. This is starting off good. Real good.
Real good. Okay.
It's all downhill from here.
So the Kiwis and the Aussies. All right. So the Kiwis, they speak English. So all this is going in the favor of, especially sellers that sell, that are English based. But I think for anybody, because of the trade rules into New Zealand, it's a great place to go to. I'd like to start off talking about the de minimis value, the history behind it, and then maybe their low value tax scheme they have in place. So I remember long ago, right when I started the company, some guy was explaining to me how to do the de minimis into New Zealand, and that I was doing it wrong. And he was correct. I was doing it wrong. So talk to me about New Zealand and the de minimis, where it was, what it is now, and how it's changed.
Well, let's put a timestamp on this. We're talking 2019 is when the changes happened. So we'll go pre-2019. So this has been 5 years ago. Time flies. Holy cow. So before 2019, what they did, and you see a few countries that do it this way, where the de minimis isn't based on the value of the goods. It's actually based on the value of the duty and tax that needs to be collected, which honestly seems pretty intuitive to me because it's saying, hey, do I need to bother collecting or not?
It's intuitive, but it's hard to calculate. That's the problem is how do you know if you're above it? So though intuitive.
It's intuitive for New Zealand.
For New Zealand.
To say, I only want to bother collecting duty and tax when it's at least a relevant amount. And that amount they put was 60 New Zealand dollars. If it's below 60 New Zealand dollars, they're not going to bother collecting. So that's how they positioned it. So what that does is that effectively, on most shipments, effectively makes the de minimis 400 New Zealand dollars because the GST rate is 15%. So if you kind of divide 15% into 60, it ends up being 400. And unless you have some
like alcohol or
tobacco
something with excise tax.
Yeah, it's effectively 400 New Zealand dollars. But yeah, you have to calculate what the duty and tax would be, then determine is that below 60 New Zealand dollars, and then
they could have made this a lot easier just by just saying 400 New Zealand dollars.
They could.
Okay, did they correct their mistake? Like what happened next? So that it changed.
Let's go with yes, they corrected it. and they added in some other things. So in 2019, they kind of followed suit with the other country, Australia, but they do work very closely together on a lot of things.
The Australia low value tax law.
So that came out in 2018. 2019, New Zealand followed suit with their own low value tax law, which basically this is a way for countries, as we've talked about in our other episodes. How can we collect tax revenue more efficiently? And the answer is we don't collect. We just make other people give it to us. Okay, so that's what this tax law is. The cool thing about New Zealand, though, is it coincided with the change in de minimis. They actually raised it. So they went from that 60 New Zealand dollars or 400 New Zealand dollars in value to 1,000 New Zealand dollars.
Oh, so $1,000 shipment now.
$1,000 shipment, the value of the goods is now duty and tax free. So they actually increased, for most sellers, they increased the amount of duty and tax shipments going to New Zealand, which is great. Might make New Zealand an even more attractive market. But that also coincided with a low value tax law, which said, okay, for larger shippers that meet a threshold, we'll talk about in a second, we want you to collect the GST at checkout and remit it directly to us. So that was kind of their way of saying, now we're going to have to collect less at the border on imports, but we're hopefully going to collect more money by now putting the burden on the retailers to remit directly to us.
Okay. Yeah. So all right. First off, which retailers have to worry about this?
The ones that are selling over 60,000 New Zealand dollars worth of low value goods a year.
Low value goods is anything under 1,000.
Yes, but it's low value goods is looking at each individual item. So your hat's worth $20. Actually, that hat's probably worth, that's probably a high value
priceless.
Good. Yeah. Okay. But let's say you have going into a shipment, golf clubs are $1,200 and a golf shoes are $400. It's just the golf shoes
that are considered low value.
Yeah. So you actually aggregate all of the low value sales that you have of goods valued below 1,000 New Zealand dollars. And if that is over 60,000 New Zealand dollars in a year, then you're supposed to register and start remitting every quarter your GST. And also that also means you're collecting at checkout at that point.
Okay. This all seems silly. But the de minimis is a shipment level de minimis.
Yes.
So de minimis 1,000 for the shipment.
Yep.
Tax is based on the item level tax.
Yep. And they happen to make them both 1,000, and so it makes it really, really confusing.
Yes. Okay. Honestly, I think it's the first time it dawned on me that those are different.
Yeah.
The shipment versus the items and what gets taxed. So, all right, more about this golf club. Let's say that I am registered for tax, for low value tax to remit directly. I'm selling more than 6,000 NZD a year, so I'm one that has to worry about it. And I have the shoes and the clubs that I'm selling. Do I remit tax on both?
Maybe.
Is this like optional or something?
It is.
What?
Yeah. I think standard would, the typical practice would be only collect GST at checkout on the shoes and remit on that, and then let the clubs have GST collected at the border.
Okay, so New Zealand's going to get tax on my order, and part of that tax is going to come from me. I'm going to give to them, and the other part, they're going to have customs do it on the same shipment. On the golf clubs.
Yeah, and then what you need to do is on your commercial invoice and the paperwork, you need to make sure you itemize it out and tell them that, hey, I collected GST on the shoes, but not on the clubs. So then they know to go collect on the clubs. How practical do you think that is?
This is not very practical. So I want you to explain to me, like, whose bright idea was this? Like, who? Okay, there has to be what? There's a scenario out there, Aaron. Why would you do this? Why would a lawmaker do this?
I think they were serving too much ale at the meeting that was discussing this. I don't know. I think at some point in time, probably in the beginning, someone decided that, hey, we're going to define low value goods based on the goods. And there was probably some reason for that, how that
to base it on each individual item, the goods, instead of the shipment value. Yeah. Okay.
Someone thought that was a good idea somewhere along the way, and I'm sure they had a valid reason for it. But then as they started unpacking it, they started realizing, whoa, wait a minute, this might get difficult. But instead of going back and changing it, they just started putting in exceptions and options
Yeah, because I'm imagining retailers or not retailers that are, maybe still B2C. Okay, so online retailers that are their average order value is, let's say, $5,000, right? Really high. And that was going to be put a burden on them for now registering for tax when they're saying, oh, we already have a method to do this at the border. So for these, but then the problem is then you end up with these ones that are somewhere in the in-betweens. So you said it's optional. So if I'm in the in-between, I can just say, I'm just going to remit tax on everything directly to you for the golf shoes and the golf clubs.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. That's the option they gave. And then on the paperwork, when you ship it, we have a doc on that kind of talks about and gives a note you could put just on there that says GST's been collected on all of these. Even put your GST number. We have an example phrase you could put there to tell them we've collected on everything. Something
too that before we skip, and I want to talk about some other things into New Zealand around this de minimis is note that if you're the merchant of record yourself, so if you as the merchant are doing the credit card processing, you then, as long as you're selling under 60,000 NZD a year, there's going to be no.
It's duty and tax free.
Duty or tax.
Yep.
Zero
on shipments.
On shipments under
1,000 New Zealand dollars.
1,000. Okay, and if it goes over 1,000, they can just collect duty and tax like normal. Like that's a pretty big benefit. 15% is a high amount.
Oh, it's huge.
But then the disadvantage, if you got to be careful, because if you're using a provider that aggregates and becomes a merchant of record, essentially, they're going to collect the 15%, even though you as an individual retailer are smaller, because they're aggregating on behalf of a bunch of retailers. Everything's going to be charged. So, as you're trying to grow, needed a small competitive advantage just as you're trying to get to the market. If you can remain the merchant of record, go to New Zealand, and it will really help you, I think, grow into that market.
I mean, you'd be 15% cheaper, right?
Yeah.
That's not small.
Okay. So duty, going to New Zealand typically is ad valorem. It's percentage based, and it's usually actually not that high. Typically, I think the average duty is about 2%, and I think in our country guide we say it ranges from 0 to 10%. What are some common goods do you know that, like, some of the what would be an average duty rate for I don't know, some apparel or things like that?
Yeah, apparel. I think I was looking at this earlier. Like a T-shirt is 10%. I think.
Okay, that's actually on the higher end. I think of duty going into New Zealand. And then
but again, that only applies on shipments over 1,000 New Zealand dollars, right? So the majority of shipments are going to be duty free.
Yes, yeah. All right, so first off, if I'm a retailer selling under 60,000 NZD and I'm not the merchant of record, no tax, no duty, unless I go over 1,000. And then if I am registered, there's going to be no duty unless it goes over 1,000.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And they do have a few trade agreements into New Zealand, and I was looking into this.
Do tell.
So the Comprehensive and Progressive Trade Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, the CPTPP. Say that quickly.
Say that fast.
CPTPP.
Say it 10 times fast.
No, not going to. And there's 11 countries, New Zealand, Australia, Canada, Japan, and some others. But it's a pretty significant one. Here's what I thought was actually interesting is there's a trade agreement between New Zealand and China. 98% of the imports coming from China are duty-free into New Zealand. That's like the complete opposite of the U.S. policy, basically, right?
Yeah.
So there's some interesting history here. I wasn't going to go to this to the end, but actually, since this is kind of leading into it, because we're going to talk about some other things. But in the early 20th century, New Zealand was historically trading with the UK, right? And in like the 50s and to the 70s, they were pretty high tariffs, right? The protectionist. And it was in the 80s that a shift occurred, and a pretty major shift to become a lot more economic friendly to other nations and lower the tariffs. And it actually had a pretty big impact on their this reform on the economy. And but impact meaning at first, I think a lot of people actually did lose some jobs. They lost some manufacturing, things like that. But overall, there was a lot of growth and a lot of other benefits. So anyway, just some interesting, interesting tidbits to New Zealand there. So far, we've talked about tax, goods and services tax going into New Zealand, the threshold. We've talked about duty, pretty low, pretty friendly duty when you go above the 1,000 NZD. But there's fees, both country fees for import and carrier fees. We'll talk about that in a second. What, if any, fees does New Zealand levy going into New Zealand, and for what?
Yeah. So there's some similarities here with Australia. Australia's got a $1,000 de minimis as well. And as we talked about on a previous podcast, you get hit with some heavy fees once it goes over that. New Zealand's the same way. Once you go over 1,000 New Zealand dollars, then they bring in the two main fees, which are the biosystem entry levy. That is $26.45 New Zealand. Does that
apply to everything?
Anything if it's over 1,000 New Zealand dollars.
So it's considered under the bio whatever.
Yeah, they're an island nation, so I don't know all the background to that.
Okay.
I just know
50 New Zealand.
No, that one's $26.45.
Oh.
And then they have an import entry transaction fee, which is $33.03. So together, we're talking around 60 New Zealand dollars, which is, for those listening, if you want to pin that back to say the US dollar, that's about 40 US dollars. So we're duty and tax free all the way up to 1,000 New Zealand dollars. That's awesome. And then, or you only have tax if you're registered and collecting. Now, once you hit that de minimis, you get duty and tax, plus you get these fees, plus you're going to get carrier fees too, which we can talk about in a second.
So when I said they were, trade friendly, I would say it was intended for non-e-commerce, probably for more B2B, right? Like those kind of fees are very trade friendly if you have a $10,000 shipment.
Yeah, and those fees are not they're not thinking e-com for those fees,
right? But I mean, okay, so 2% duty. Let's say that's the average duty, which sounds great. And you have 1,000 NZD shipment, and it's going to be 60 NZD. That's another 6%. So that fee on $1,000 shipment is going to be more expensive than the duty in many cases.
Oh yeah,
not as expensive as the tax at 15%, but
obviously it's a drop in the bucket on 100,000.
Yeah, so you're not going to 20 to 25% total cost of the goods between tax, duty, these fees. If you're in that $1,000 to $1,500 range on an order.
And there is one other fee that's worth talking about for those that are registered. If you're registered in remitting tax and you're paying with a credit card, they charge you 1.42% of the tax amount that you're remitting. So when you go to remit every quarter, however many thousands of dollars of GST you're remitting, if you pay with a credit card, they charge you for that too. So that's something to be aware of. And we help build that into our calculations to make sure those costs are covered. But that's one that's kind of a gotcha that people probably overlook a lot.
Interesting. Okay, let's go to the main carriers that have fees here. So UPS, FedEx, DHL. UPS and FedEx are both based on the country of import.
Yep.
So meaning it's going to New Zealand. It's a New Zealand specific fee going to New Zealand. And they're fairly similar, but I think I have them in front of me here. So UPS, 3% of the import duties and taxes, or 16 New Zealand dollar? I think that's what
I believe so. Yeah,
16 NZD, and then FedEx is 2.9% or 20 NZD, depending on whichever's greater, right? So if it's a high value shipment, you might get into the percentages, or it's going to be just the flat. That flat fee, 16 for UPS and 20 for FedEx.
And those only come into play over 1,000 New Zealand dollars.
Only over 1,000. Yep. Yep. DHL's different. How?
So DHL, I like to look at FedEx and UPS as FedEx New Zealand and UPS New Zealand is assessing this, and then they bill it back through to wherever it needs to bill to, right? DHL, the way they structure it is whatever account it's billing to. So it's New Zealand might have duty and tax that then gets billed back through, and then they add it on at the end when they go to bill, which is now going to be, if you're in the US and you're getting billed in the US, it's $17 for their DTP fee. But if you're getting billed in Australia, you're an Australian merchant shipping into New Zealand, and you're going to be billed based on the Australian. So the nice thing about that is you know what it's going to be because everything you ship anywhere in the world is going to be billed back to you on your.
So as an exporter, this is actually really easy. For this podcast, it makes it a little more difficult to explain when you're, because it's now to New Zealand. It just depends is the answer. If you're shipping with DHL, it depends on where your origin is or billing account is.
Yeah, but it simplifies it globally. So if you're shipping in, I just know that when I'm going to have duty and taxes billed to me, I'm going to get charged the same amount no matter where it's going in the world. Whereas FedEx and UPS, it depends. Like New Zealand has one rate, France has another rate, UK has another rate, and so it's all over the map.
But Australia's 30 AUD
for DHL.
I'm sorry, for DHL.
Yeah,
that's expensive.
Not cheap. That's not cheap at all.
That's gonna probably. If you have good discounts, that's more expensive than your your discounted rate.
Yep.
That's wild. Okay. I've driven through New Zealand. There's some open space there. I'm sure there's some remote area surcharges going on. Were you able to pull? Do you know some of those remote area surcharges? I think I have some of them here, but
yeah. So this is a shipping charge, that you're going to get hit. It's $30 to $50.
Yeah, I think UPS is 30. FedEx, it ranges from $3.95, $49.64. This is based on the country of export, though, right? So this actually might be different if you're in Australia. Your remote area surcharges might be different going to New Zealand. So.
Because this is based on your shipping contract, what you've negotiated for shipping rates in there. If you've negotiated your rural delivery area surcharges, then you can have discounts on this, but it's all based on your contract. So if you're in Australia, it could be totally different.
And DHL, I think, is in that same range. So just basically be planning on somewhere from $25 to $30 in a remote area surcharge if it ends up, going pretty remote out there.
If you're selling, depending on who your customer is, if it's mainly metropolitan customers that are buying from you because of your goods, probably not a huge issue. But if you're selling,
to the hobbits,
yes, out in the Shire, somewhere in the middle of nowhere, and the type of good you're selling is to farmers and those, or people that like to outdoor recreate. So you're selling to a lot of, off-road enthusiasts or ski bums or something like that, that live out in the sticks. Well, you should be negotiating on this because it can be really impactful on your costs.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, to wrap up on a couple things that are, kind of interesting, but maybe not that impactful is, payment methods are pretty standard going to New Zealand. They do a fair amount of like online banking transfers. But they also, similar to Australia, have the Poly payments, which is an online payment system. It allows direct bank transfers, so similar to the kind of bank transfers for online banking. There are some prohibited and restricted goods going into Australia. Obviously, they have those fees, for the biosecurity thing. But the one that seems usually the most impactful is anything that's animal product related. And this is globally, but if you mother of pearl or fur or something like that. If you're selling anything like that, it might be restricted or all out, prohibited. If you have alligator, boots, I don't know. But those are the kind of things that, you need to be careful when exporting and shipping internationally with those type of products. Anything else that we missed on selling to New Zealand?
Well, I've never been to New Zealand or got to know the people there, but in general, my understanding is it's a pretty developed nation.
Yep.
And they're active, the economy is good. They're actively shopping and they kind of have to buy a lot from outside New Zealand if they want to get what they want, right? So from that perspective, it seems like a great market to go after because there's a lot of consumers that are looking to buy products.
All right. Well, till next time, Aaron. Thank you.
Thank you.